Yeah. So what have you been doing with yourself? Are you in isolation? Are you working still?
I am. We are in rural Pennsylvania with my wife's mom and stepdad, and so I've kind of set up my studio in their basement. So
Wicked.
we're out
That's
of the city. Yeah. So that's pretty
good.
cool.
That's awesome. Wicked. So yeah. So you should have quite a furtive period,
Yeah,
hopefully.
that's it's nice. I mean, it sucks that everything's happening, but it's nice to be safe and not in New York because they say anyone who's been there, they want who's been in New York the past like month should self quarantine for 2 weeks when they leave.
Yeah.
So,
So,
how's it in England right now?
it's kind of a weird. It's just. It's a little chaotic in a strange way. It's like a calm chaotic, like English people would, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It's like tons of. I was out on Monday because I had to work and do a few errands and stuff, and there's just tons of old people on the streets still, like just
Yeah.
roaming around, just going, oh yeah, great, oh it's nice, isn't it? So yeah, you're supposed to be in. so yeah, so I don't think, and people were still clinging to going to the pub to the last minute and everything. So the problem with English people is they love a good moan. So if they're if you're if the thing is they were sitting indoors anyway, they weren't going to like gigs or the cinema or anything
Right.
anyway. They're streaming everything online and not bothering to do anything. And then the minute they're told, oh, you can't go out, they're like, it's an outrage. No way. This is awful. Do you know what I mean? So, but they wouldn't have been out anyway. Now, suddenly, there were people down at the beach in
Right.
England. It's
Right.
February. No, it's
Right.
not February. It's March. It's okay. It's March, but it's March. It's not beach weather. Do you know what I mean? It's just the sun came
Right.
out hill. But you tell people they can't go out. Suddenly they're trying to get to the coast and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's so yeah. So we're just being our usual obtuse, difficult, moany selves. I think so.
Do you think the older people don't know or they just don't care or both?
I think it's a mix, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think it's on the one hand, there's the information. I don't know how well it's distributed and how that happens, and that these days we live in quite a fractured society in terms of who's getting their information how. I mean, a lot of those people probably still get most of it from the telly
Yeah.
directly, I would imagine, as
Yeah.
opposed to people. Well, I mean, I'm not really much of a telly person anymore, but I wouldn't say I'm totally plugged into the internet either. So I actually end up kind of with almost a bit of a buffer between me and news for a little while, if you know what I mean. And so,
Yeah.
but then, people younger than me are totally hooked up to kind of this all the time. So I think between everybody, all the different generations, I think there's quite a lot of different information and amount of information. Like so we went to get some shopping uh, on Monday, and we bought these ice creams. So we're like, well, there's a field literally just around the back of the supermarket. So we're like, well, we'll quickly eat these as it's nice and sunny. We'll eat them outside in the park. There's no one ever in the park. Went round there, tons of people in the park, all
Uh,
over the park. Do you know what I mean? Like usually it's like totally empty, and so and then people were like, their dogs were all running around off the leash and stuff. So they're like running up to people, and you're kind of like, there's like a virus going around. I don't know if you've heard. Or I mean, they're
right.
like, yes, but it's nothing to do with dogs, is it? It's like, well, actually, it can be spread through animals because if you stroke them and then someone else strokes and then, do you know what I mean? But like, how
Yeah.
much information is getting to people and how much they're willfully going to try and find it out is another matter entirely as well. So I don't
Mhm.
know. I think now that literally the government is texting you on your phone saying stay indoors, there can be
That's
a
what's
lot
happening.
less doubt. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and like it's gonna be, and cops are out on the street going, hey, why are you out? Kind of thing and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it is literally for shops and medical and business basically. So yeah.
You know, Lee, it's like it seems like this is all unprecedented and everyone's kind of improvising and figuring out how
Oh,
they're going to
absolutely.
do this. So that's kind of what's scary, but also like I guess there's some leniency because it's new, right? And hopefully people do the
Yeah.
right.
And also, I guess if you look at like different countries, they're all affected at a different rate, at a different speed. So, like, we can look at like other countries, and actually, although it seems like we've been acting quite differently, actually, we're just kind of doing the same things, just at a slightly more drawn out pace or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So there's some kind of precedent for what's going on if you're in Britain, because you can see everything happening everywhere else first and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like what New York has been doing for like the last little while is now what London will be like. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, and you just kind of like with the bombing of Britain and World War One, you're separated by the channel, so you kind of have this buffer where it's going to be right.
I think it's a mental one as much as anything. I think if anything, like Brexit probably illustrates that. Do you know what I mean? But I think there's a whole Britain is an island unto itself, and each person within it is a little bit of that going on as well. So but no man is an island when it comes to an epidemic. So
yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't remember anything ever happening like this.
Certainly on this kind of scale, it's pretty intense, isn't it? Yeah, it's like the closest thing I guess would be older people would say wartime or whatever, and things like that. So but yeah, certainly in that way, it's from a really purely analytical perspective, it's an interesting thing to live through, I guess, and watch culture, see how this strange culture that's built up over like the last little while, suddenly like the connectivity of it is like vital, whereas before it was kind of like this kind of weird Pandora's boxy kind of like semi-evil, semi-good kind of thing. Now it's just like, oh well, we need this, don't we? Do you know what I mean?
And it's interesting how the spread of it has been facilitated by the increase of travel and our interconnectivity, but also the information about it has been so spread because we're also connected, which is good. And we can share and like use our platforms to tell people to stay inside and connect with people we haven't talked to for a while, like right now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? Yeah, it's been I've done already just one of these interviews with someone from Oxford. Do you remember Spike, sound man at the Zodiac? Yeah, I had a chat with him about some. He used to play for Sinead O'Connor, so we did like a little interview about that and everything. Cool. And it was really cool to catch up with him because these are people that you kind of saw on quite a not less so obviously with you not a regular basis, but if there was a chance, then it would. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so it's cool. Yeah, wicked. It's good to see you. You haven't aged a day either. What's going on? Have you got like a picture of you just out of sight that's like hideously old and crumpled up? You know what I mean?
Well, I would say the same thing about you. You look even younger.
I think you're only saying it because I said it. So yeah. Anyway, I'm wearing a Superman hat just to kind of make me look a bit more boyish. Do you know what I mean?
You know what the trick is when you get like something that helped me with touring and stuff is about 4 years ago I stopped drinking and smoking weed and all that, and that's helped. I think like it's helped me get more rest. I mean, everyone has their own path, but like that's been cool. Yeah.
I think I mean I'm certainly not on the hell-bent warpath that I was during some of my years anymore. And it's probably just as well because I do have to like work and stuff. So I do have, my body has to get from A to B and and my mind has to be semi-capable at least to do some things. So yeah, it's probably for the best. I feel a little like, I don't know, I watched have you seen The Dirt, the Motley Crue film?
Yeah.
When I watched that, I was like really like kind of not depressed, but like gutted. And I was like, my life used to resemble this a lot. And then the next day, like I was at work and I was thinking, maybe I should just be happy that my life resembled it at all, ever. Do you know what I mean? Because how many people even get to say that and still be alive after? So, it's...
and gosh, and the Motley Crue thing is crazy because like what's Mick Mars? Is he the guy? Yes. He's the guitarist.
With the spinal.
He has his health problems, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got that spinal thing. Yeah.
And that was interesting. How, like, was it? Who was the one who killed his friend?
That's Vince Neil. Vince Neil in the car, the singer. Yeah, he had a crash whilst they were. Yeah. The consequences. Have you read the book?
I read the book, yeah, like maybe
The books,
2000.
ages ago for me as well. Probably around about the same kind of time. Maybe a tiny bit, like a few years before that. I think it was 2004. I think I read it. But yeah, it was. I got into Motley Crue as a band because of reading that book, really, because I wanted some context. I used to think, cock rock, I don't like it. Like only Guns N' Roses. That's the only LA band that I would give any kind of props or whatever. So like LA hair band or whatever, like glam LA strip band, like obviously I love my Chili's and my Fishbone and Jane's Addiction and all that kind, and Rage Against the Machine, all that kind of stuff. But I was quite like down on the cock rock thing because I was a Nirvana kid, so we came in like, wipe it all out, wipe the slate clean, take a scythe to it. Do you know what I mean? So
rubbing alcohol through the strip, right? That Nirvana rare track.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did you ever see
gallons of rubbing alcohol flow through the strip. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I didn't. One of the most gutting things in my life ever was my uncle used to be an import-export, and he was sorting me out. He used to sort me out passes, and then sometimes just free tickets, sometimes backstage passes for like gigs and stuff, and it was amazing. And he was sorting me out tickets for the In Utero tour. And I was literally talking about it with one of my college mates, so excited, having a drink in a pub, went home and put on Nevermind. It's on the second side, so it's Territorial Pissings. And I was like, I want to say 17. I might be fudging years slightly, but and I thrashed about my kitchen because no one was in. Thrashed about my kitchen with the broomstick even, and did the full works for the whole of that side of the album. Then I didn't want to listen to the first side because I knew it so well by that point. Like first side Nevermind is like imprinted on your brain at this point. You know what I mean? And so then I turned on the radio, and it was the local radio, Fox FM, was live from Park End. So I was like, no thanks. Like, which was the kind of commercial club at the time, the kind of bland club or whatever. So I was like, no thanks. Swiveled the dial and landed on John Peel, and he was saying how the body of Kurt Cobain had just been found. And
oh wow,
so that was heavy. And then the very next day, I went with a friend to Oxford's indie store, Green River, which was obviously named after the band Green River, or at least there was definitely that association for me. I don't know if they named it after that. I presume so, but yeah. So then went to Green River Records and I bought Celebrity Skin, Miss World on pink vinyl 7-inch, and took a risk on a band called the Mystics, who were from Oxford, and they had a 7-inch with a little badge as well. I thought, you get a free badge, 99p for the 7-inch. It's got a cool cover, it looks good. Guy behind the counter said, they're a great band, local band, you should get it or whatever. And that was like one of the very first local music bands, certainly outside of Radiohead. I bought some Radiohead, but that was one of the first. So that whole little 24-hour period was like hugely crucial to me in terms of influential times in music and like landmark. It's like the John Lennon dying thing. I know exactly where I was. I can feel it. Like, when I talk to you about it, I'm like there in that kitchen in Ensham in Oxfordshire. Do you know what I mean? Crazy.
And so the In Utero tour, they never did any part of that tour. Did they do part of it?
They were, as far as I remember, they were in Italy when Kurt had an overdose of some kind. And then they pulled the tour and came back, and then he was on like, I'm on a break, and and he jumped out of rehab, didn't he? From that, he jumped out of rehab and snuck back to Seattle, as far as I know. That if my memory of, I don't linger on the death so much sometimes, and I don't like to. I felt guilty when I watched montage of Heck, and someone bought me the Kurt Cobain Diaries, and I literally flicked through them that day when they got it for me, and I haven't opened them since. There's something really strange and sacred about Kurt somehow. I can't really explain it. I just feel a little dirty. Maybe it's because I feel like he might have thought that way, if you know what I mean. It's different when you have different people and you think, they wouldn't mind that, and other people where you go, they wouldn't have liked that.
Well,
you know what I mean?
he didn't want to be the messiah and the pop culture like arena, right? He didn't want to be that. Everyone hated him as a savior.
But by contrast, he did call up his manager if after an hour he hadn't seen Smells Like Teen Spirit on MTV. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so you know, like, and I don't. But I mean, you know, that is two different things as well. Wanting success and wanting a platform isn't necessarily wanting all the trappings of everything that comes with knocking Michael Jackson off #1. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That's a whole other. There's like success, and then there's what? And they went from Bleach to above Michael Jackson. Do you know? Yeah, exactly. You know,
Speaking of his manager, he wrote a really great book last year that I love.
Really?
It's called Serving the Servant, and it's a
I'd love to. Yeah, I would.
Story from his perspective, the business perspective. Yeah, I think you would like that, Lee. I recommend it.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Interesting. That's the second book I've been recommended today. I was recommended Helter Skelter, which I haven't read.
Oh God, I've never read that.
Yeah, so yeah, I literally finished a book for the first time in ages today as well. I was reading the Morris Day from the Time, his biography, which has the voice of Prince interrupting him as he's writing it. So it's a real trip to read. It's like
in his head or Prince commented on it.
He says it's Prince in his head talking to him. Like he'll say something and Prince will go, "Oh, is that what you think about that? Is it?" Or whatever. And he'll like give him some grief about it or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's a really entertaining read in that way. Like you'll fly through it in a day. You like for someone who actually reads a lot, like you plow through it. Whereas it took me a couple of days just because I had to get back into the swing of reading. I read a lot of comics, so
cool.
I'm used to some pictures there as well. I'm like, where's all the pictures?
Lee, I know you're a Batman fan, right?
Yes, very much so.
What's your favorite of the Batman movies? Going all the way back to
Batman 89. Batman 89.
That's
where the Smilex chemical is featured. The thing that kills everybody with a smile on their face. That's the chemical.
Where it came from.
Yeah, that's where it came from. I wanted the band that had the same kind of impact. It says something about products as well, or something as well. There's an anti-corporate and anarchistic product kind of vibe to it, which most people didn't get. They just called us Smiles and Smiley and things like that all the time. We'd always get to places and on the bill it would say Smiley or the Smiles and stuff. Like they're going to be in for a shock. We are not Smiley.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, Batman 89 is that I still think it's the classic. You still can watch it and it's still enchanting and it's enrapturing and compelling, and it's from the big Pinewood days and things like that. Do you know what I mean? So it's made in a way that films aren't really nowadays. Do you know what I mean? And it's the first of all of these superhero, the big blockbuster. You can say maybe Superman way back, but really it's about Batman, because that took it into we're going to take this a bit more seriously. We're going to I don't know, tie it in with an album and the toy range and the whole kind of the breakfast cereal, and it was the first of the whole. There could be none of the landscape of cinema as it is now without those building blocks laid by Batman 89. Yeah.
That's true. Did you ever see wasn't there a Batman movie like in the 50s based on the show?
Yeah, I mean it's a fun romp just like the show, really. I don't hate the show. It's like good fun, do you know what I mean? But what I find amazing is that for all the praise that is heaped on Christopher Nolan for his very serious, hard-hitting, gritty, real take on Batman, the whole trilogy ends on exactly the same point that 60s movie opens with, which is some days you just can't get rid of a bomb. And that's exactly how the Dark Knight trilogy ends, is some days you just can't get rid of a bomb, and he flies out with this into the distance. So it's really that for all the seriousness, etc., it's actually the same theme as the campy Batman had at its very, very beginning opening scenes. It's quite odd,
That's cool.
right?
Watching that order, right? To go back and
Yeah,
seeing that.
it goes a weird full circle in some strange way.
Did you see Joker? And if so,
Yeah,
what did you?
yeah. Oh well, I mean, obviously, I love Joaquin Phoenix's. Are you interviewing me? Yeah, I love Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I think it's amazing and worth
Yeah.
every bit of praise that's heaped on it. I think the film's got beautiful lighting. It's got some lovely on-location filming and stuff, and it's very good at eliciting a mood from a feeling from you and a mood from you. But I do feel like it's a few things have kind of, it's a bit Emperor's New Clothesy in a way, because I don't know if you've seen King of Comedy.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Remind me of
beat
that.
for beat. It is beat for beat. Like every 10, 15 minutes, I had never seen it. For some reason, it had escaped me, even though I'm a big Scorsese, big De Niro guy, somehow I just missed this film. And then when we watched it, I was literally turning to Grace every 10, 15 minutes going, it's the same film.
Because he's a comic who wants to, right?
And just it all plays out, like, as the things happen. And if it's not from that, I would say it's 75% King of Comedy and then 25% Taxi Driver.
Right. Yeah, Taxi Driver.
There's even a point where he does a you talking to me speech with like a fictional non-existent person at the same kind of point in the movie where Robert De Niro does his. Do you know what I mean? And so I kind of feel like there's some trickery and some kind of hoodwinkery going on where, like, it's almost like the way I said it to a friend just the other day was, should I make a Doctor Doom movie and I'll make it 75% Godfather, and for the other 25% I'll throw in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Do you know what I mean? And I'll just do a big tribute to Coppola, and it'll be a Doctor Doom. It'll say Doctor Doom on it, but I won't have him quite as comic-y. I'll have him as just a dictator who lives in a far-off castle in a European country, i.e. get a bit of that Bram Stoker's Dracula vibe in there. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And do you know what I mean? And then I'll do him as a bit of a crime lord who kind of builds up his empire, like from humble beginnings, like The Godfather. Like, is this a new method of trickery that we can do where we cut and paste other films and slap like he painted King of Comedy and Taxi Driver. He took the scripts and he then highlighted it in pink and green marker. Do you know what I mean? And said, that's a Joker script. And really, it's Joker Begins at best. Really, because you don't get much Joker. When he is the Joker and he's all gangly and stuff, it's really good. Visually, it's like, oh, this could be amazing if they go one more film and go deep into that. But a lot of it's like, and also another thing that really bothers me about it is I got into the Joker when I was about 8 years old through Batman comics. He was the coolest character, the most attractive, also really edgy, like for a kid, like who wants something a little bit edgy and stuff. But this Joker makes Heath Ledger's Joker look like Jack Nicholson's Joker.
That's true.
So where does this all end? Do we end up with the next Joker film? He's not got any makeup. He's just a gun-wielding psychopath who cries in a room. Do you know what I mean? And it's got no relation to anything that you actually associate with the Joker. These kind of retellings and kind of making it more for people who don't like comics actually takes away a lot of the joy. And for me, at least, I had this 13-year-old kid come up to me and say, "Oh, so Joker, what was your favorite kill?" And I thought about it and I said, do I sound old-fashioned or childish that I'm more taken by him squirting some acid out of a flower or joy buzzering someone until they're a skull? Like, it just seems more creative. It just seems more magical and kind of, like more why you get involved with the cinema and do you know what I mean? And all that kind of thing. So and I kind of feel like, it's a shame that there's a Joker movie out that isn't really much fun, and you can't show a 10-year-old kid who really loves the Joker. Do you know what I mean? So instead we're busy pleasing, and I say this being someone who is very entrenched in the comic world and all of that kind of stuff, effectively a kind of, for want of a better description, of man children or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Where we're kind of, they're so busy trying to appease older people's sensibility of what a young person's thing should be, they actually gets to the point where it's hard to please any of them. I think we saw that with the Star Wars films a lot, by which it takes 3 films to finally get round to something that vaguely resembles a cohesive story that made any sense, and really is just through a load of retconning and crowd pleasing, really. And I'm a sucker for some of the crowd pleasing. I like some of the bits that are just pure nostalgia or whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a very healthy way for cinema to move forward. It seems like the cheapest way of repackaging things in this day of like post-Marvel, everybody wanting to find a good way of making a quick, cheap film in a green screen studio with a big actor for 4 days, but some TV actors for the bulk of it. And, we can churn this around, because movies used to be about making money, and now they're really trying to get back to, we've got to make money out of these things. So rather than actually, they've got to just make them for cheaper and cheaper. Do you know what I mean? So that's going to lead to a lot of cut corners, and a lot of these other franchise films have tried to do the Marvel thing, but totally screwed it up. The Godzilla movies, the Independence Day, the even some of the DC movies, there's a whole load of the Hellboy film. Like, they're all trying to do that same method, that same kind of approach behind the scenes, the production side, and trying to get the same results. It only works with the Marvel thing because they've got this whole infrastructure interlinked thing of, it's like a hive mind. Do you know what I mean? So that's why it works, having its own little, it's like a studio where it's like the White Album. You've got George Harrison in one room doing this, and you've got Paul McCartney in one room doing this, and John Lennon, but you've got George Martin walking between them, and and kind of, it just kind of pulls it together into one. And so the Marvel universe is like that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's so not that I'm saying it's like always as good as the White Album is, but
I one thing I liked about Joker, speaking of consistency, and a lot of my nerd comic friends didn't like this, I love the Bruce Wayne connection and the connection to what happens to his parents at the end. I thought that was cool because it was creepy and made sense. I liked that they tied in that. What do you think?
I liked when he swung down that little pole. That was funny. That was good.
Remind me that
little Bruce got on this little pole and he just swung down to the bottom of it, like he was on like in a garden or something, and he was on something, and he just swung down a little pole. I did like that. I don't know why I shouldn't have, but I did like it. But I felt like what's weird to me is a lot of people have a lot of issues with, how could they make the Joker, Jack Napier, the murderer of Bruce's parents, when it was obviously Joe Chill, and isn't it great that the Dark Knight got that bit right, and all this kind of business. But then in this really gritty, serious take on Joker, we've got him being brothers with Batman. That sounds like the most far-fetched thing you could possibly have come up with.
Brother, right?
It's like He-Man and Skeletor being brothers or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
but Lee, doesn't it? I mean, not spoiler alert for anyone watching. Doesn't it?
Oh well, they should have seen it by now. Being honest, shouldn't they?
Yeah, but he's not his brother. Doesn't that get revealed that the mom made all this up?
There's nothing in that film that is for sure.
So he could be his brother, his half brother.
Because it could be that Thomas Wayne is doing a what's his name, a kind of these things happen in real life where things are swept under the carpet and illegitimate kids are kind of paid, mothers are paid off, and things
and the
like
mom
that.
Was telling the truth, you're saying?
Maybe she's just perceived as mental. Half of the film is about what's perceived as mental and what's actually mental. Do you know what I mean? So
his relationship with the neighbor, that was interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean that was totally invented. And I did think that's really weird that she doesn't mind him stalking her like this.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I thought that too. I thought this is not really happening. I don't know, right? It's like I really thought it was.
Well, I was glad that it turned out to be in his brain, because if it hadn't, it would have been very alarming in terms of what they were trying to say about Zazie Beetz' character or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So that would have taken a lot more explaining, to kind of have her as this semi-Harley-esque kind of person with no background to it. Do you know what I mean? At least with Harley, we have the established thing of, oh, you know, over a while he chipped away at her. Do you know what I mean? Whereas going from stalking someone to being their boyfriend is a really hard job. I don't know how many times you've tried it.
And it also says something bad about that kind of action being rewarded, right? That's like
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's enough about that. There's enough fear of that kind of stuff going on in that movie anyway, without, you know, like I'm not super. I don't demand morality from films at all for a second. I just demand engagement really from films. But I do question, because I see like a lot of young kids who are really into Deadpool, you know, think he's a hero, even though he's a mercenary. A mercenary is someone who kills people for money. So that's not really a hero. And girls who want to be Harley Quinn, and you kind of think, please be the one in the onesie, not the one in the hot pants. You're only like 6. Do you know what I mean? So I do kind of, there's something about the red and blues, I call them, like Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America. They have like a hope and a positivity, which I think is really good for the youngsters. And I think you should maintain your innocence and try and keep the edge away, because adult life is boring, and you should, you know, keep as many fun things for when you're an adult as possible. So you need a Deadpool movie when you're an adult. Do you know what I mean? When you're a kid, you've got all this other cool stuff that you can like be excited about. Do you know what I mean? So I do think, you know, it's interesting how amoral, whilst pleading a moral case, the Joker movie can be at points. You know, at points it's severely amoral, but it's definitely trying to tell you it's pleading its own moral standpoint. And I think that's a complex thing that a lot of people won't bother taking on board so much as seeing a totemistic idea of anarchy as solving problems. And I think there's room for anarchy. I like a bit of anarchy, but I think also, you know, sometimes rioting and things like that, they have like really strange repercussions that mainly affect people that could have done with it the least, really, out of everybody and stuff like that. So I think, you know, it's really, I think that I wish that the film was less moral in a sense, or had less of a moral standpoint, because then you could just see it as wanton nihilism and things like that. Do you know what I mean? And then it is a depiction of such. Do you know what I mean? Rather than, you know, this other thing where it's going, oh, check out our point, which is a very salient, decent point to make about mental health, you know, and everything. There's plenty of, you know, great things that are said in that movie, so I'm not taking away from that. But it's a, you know, if you're looking, this is when we start to make, the problem is when you start to make comic films which are demanding to be analyzed in an adult way, then I guess they have to stand up to it then when you do it. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the fine line. If you're going to make that leap into that kind of realm of debate and everything, and that kind of level of debate, then you have to be willing to step up to it. And I'm worried that also from just a filmmaking standpoint, that the film's just too derivative to actually take that seriously, to really lift up to that level, to start going deep into the debates that you could about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it's just not quite, it's the same way as Nolan. I feel like he's so wears his heart on his sleeve about how embarrassed he is about the comic side of Batman, and doesn't want to be thought of as cheesy or anything like that. But then we'll use the same old tricks, Hollywood tricks, that they've used for decades, that are just as cheesy in film as comic tropes are in comics. So, for example, Bane is the big bad of the final film, right up until the very second that he's revealed to not be the big bad. And then Catwoman just shoots him with a bike. And he was like the insurmountable peak before that point. And the very minute they say, I'm not the real bad guy, it's like, bang, you're dead, you're out of it. And that's such a cheap, obvious, like cheesy movie move. But Nolan's fine to do that. But he's not fine to, you know, have like something else where actually she is Catwoman properly. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Because he's scared it might make it silly. And it's like, meanwhile, they're both talking in, I have got this reckoning, and where's the trigger? So it's already silly. Do you know what I mean? So it's about a man who dresses as a bat. If it was practical, someone would already be doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean? If that was a thing people could really do, it would be being done. You know? So you know,
right? It's that idea. What is it? The willful suspension of disbelief,
yes.
Meaning that you go into saying this is not real, this is characters, and then the directors play with that. But it's a difficult thing. I mean,
well, I think as the world becomes more and more exposed to so much, I think it's very difficult. The world finds it difficult to do willful suspension of disbelief without a kind of grounding. You know, like the Marvel universe is pretty out there, but they give it this little grounding that lets everybody kind of get on board. Just enough, just get on board. It's not, it's well out there straight away from the moment go, this seems a bit silly. I don't know if I like this. Do you know what I mean? There's millions of things that people don't get into because they go, I think this is a bit silly, maybe not for me. And so, you know, like sidestepping that is half the battle with, I think, all of these IPs and all of this domain. Do you know what I mean? Half of it is putting it in. I think part of the missteps of Star Wars, from my personal taste, are where they say weird things like holding for General Hux, and I'm like, holding? Is that a thing that they do in Star Wars world? Like, has anybody ever held on something? Why? They're on these things where they're on visual communicate. Like, I don't get it. Is that sounds like something from Earth? Like, so it breaks, it takes me out of the thing. So, but I think they think they're kind of making it accessible for people, saying things that people will relate to. But for me, it feels too relatable in a sense. Do you know what I mean? In The Hobbit, there's a bit where a guy goes, some fish and chips. And I'm like, whoa, hang on, stop right there. Fish and chips. Do you know what I mean? In the Hobbit days, like, do you know what I mean? So, you know, those kind of things really take me out of a film. Whereas I don't know if the same reaction can be said for a lot of people. I don't even understand the modern cinematic audience anyway. They'll watch every bit of info they can about a movie before they go.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas I particularly want to know as little as possible after the first little bit to get me a bit excited. I just don't want to know anymore. I just want it all to be there when I go. Do you know what I mean? And so it's a whole different audience. Like, I think, you know, the way that the flip over into this century, which is facilitated by a little kind of 7-year adjustment period or something, like culture is, the preferences and demands and everything are absolutely at counterpoints to what they were during the time when I most got into everything, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's very unrelatable in that respect. You know? We
are both pop culture fans who've been making art for decades now, and I think it's this question of, like, I worry sometimes. I don't worry, but I think about, like, my opinions or my nostalgia for the past is definitely kind of like, okay, old man, okay, boomer. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
With music, you know, it's like,
it's very hard, isn't it? I mean, I love Janelle Monáe, for example, but I also feel like the reasons I love Janelle Monáe are the old school things that she brings to the table as much as anything modern or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's almost the more, like, her most recent record was her most commercial, and like there's a sliding scale from her first record to her most recent record in terms of how much I like it as she gets more in step with how things are. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to being her own thing. So yeah, I feel that all the time. The only thing that makes me feel like maybe we're not awful is because the corporate factory side of music has started to dominate it so much because of I think the speculation of cash has come down and all these kind of other factors, the birth of, you know, social media as marketing, the talent show as the main form of music on your telly, and all those kind of things. I think all of those things have changed the industry from what we necessarily knew it as anyway. So it stands to reason that we wouldn't see as much in the new stuff as we would if it were being made in a similar way to how it was being made when we got into it. Does that make sense? You know, so like the last band you can even name is maybe what, the Killers?
Less, right.
Huge.
Yeah.
Like you can, like everybody can name 5 of their songs, and they play stadiums and
Well,
and
but young people, yeah, for young people would be like the K-pop bands would be that status of
but they don't
international.
play instruments, so it doesn't matter.
You're talking about
There are
actual
factory,
bands
the
that play their
K-pop
instruments.
bands. They have one K-pop band where there's 50 members, so they can just interchange them. You can't tell me that that's about personality anymore.
What
You know
about
what I mean?
Imagine? Would you imagine? They're probably the last big arena band young kids know.
Who's
about.
that? Sorry, Imagine Dragons.
Have you heard of them?
Yeah, one hit, Radioactive.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe
they're
bigger in New York.
not U2, are they? Do you know what I mean? Like, as in
But
Killers.
I guess
Killers are the closest thing you could say to like a U2, like the modern day, the last version you can name that got that kind of mass appeal and that big, where they're a band that everybody knows their stuff.
But I would say young people might not even know U2, and you just have to
No,
realize.
I'm not saying that U2 are like known now, but what I'm saying is that also bear in mind young people don't buy a lot, and they also, do you know what I mean? So there's also that factor. You can be a big act to kids and still be struggling for money. Do you know what I mean? So
Totally.
so whereas back in the day you could be the smallest band in your subgenre and still make a living.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, you know, let's pick oh wow, who should we go for? Silverchair, or someone who's like, you know, that's the dribble down of the dribble down of the dribble down of Nirvana. But they can still be huge. Do you know what I mean? Or on the smaller side, something weird like Primus or I don't know, Sebadoh can keep up a big career for ages just doing what they do. Do you know what I mean? So that comes with a audience that expect to pay for their art to a degree, not pay for the technology and then all the art be free on the technology. Do you know what I mean? So it's a change in mindset. You know, when do you watch the Defiant Ones, right?
What's it called?
The Defiant Ones, the documentary about Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah.
It's very telling that after a while that documentary becomes about selling headphones.
And about Apple Music's strength.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
And slowly all the musicians aren't even in the documentary anymore. And it's just about this product, you know what I mean? And so I think, you know, the technology thing, the angle is, you know, technology's been, it's afforded the smallest artists the greatest of platforms, but it's turned it into an ocean, which is unnavigated. You can't really navigate as a fan without some guidance. And the problem is the mainstream doesn't cover alternative. The mainstream only really covers mainstream. It might bring something into it now and then and make a plastic version of the alternative now and then for you.
Right.
Really, it hasn't engaged with the alternative world for a good decade, maybe longer, 15 years. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a key part of, you know, why, you know, it used to be that, you know, you didn't mix up your Take That and your Nirvana. Do you know what I mean? They weren't all just one thing. It was like, here's this, and right over there's that. This we don't take seriously. It's just this fun, teeny bopper, you know, stuff for, you know, kids and, you know, and young girls to swoon over or whatever. And, you know, and the gay market whilst they're building it up. And you know, and then you know, on the other side you had Nirvana, who play instruments. They go out and gig, and Nirvana being the perfect example because they were literally just a dumpy toilet venue and small festival, you know, touring band, you know, in a van, that kind of business. And then suddenly those values became paramount. It's not just like, don't get me wrong, it took the right band with the right sound and the right songs and the right even an image that you can do without spending hardly any money. You can go and get a jumper. You can go and your jeans can be in a crappy state. It doesn't matter. You can cut them off if you're a Pearl Jam fan. Do you know what I mean? So it's accessible for anybody. Do you know what I mean? So it becomes more universal. It becomes less pretentious. It becomes less about that unobtainable thing and more about me seeing a band playing Nirvana songs in a youth center and thinking, I could play in a band.
Right.
And so, you know, so it's the values that became paramount for just a short amount of time. Just like up until about the co-opting of it, Robbie Williams doing indie music, playing at Glastonbury and not a single tomato. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas if you try and took Daphne and Celeste to Reading, they'd get loads of stuff chucked at them. Do you know what I mean? So that's the kind of the cultural sea change that happens when you kind of like, you know, when suddenly things start getting accepted, and then all the kind of, I think the depression angle probably put people off as well. Like, listen to music that means anything is engaging with depression, whereas I just want to get through my day with a smile on my face. So I guess I'm not going to investigate real bands anymore, because aren't they depressing? One of them even blew his own head. Do you know what I mean? So
right.
I think that didn't help. You know, Radiohead became like one of the biggest bands in the world just after that, which Radiohead are absolutely associated in all ways with depressing music. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's you know, whether everybody feels that way or not, it's definitely something that they're tagged with. Do you know what I mean? So I think, and they moved away from guitars as well. So everybody kind of moved away from guitars and started going, oh no, we're mainly because they were bored. Do you know what I mean? They said guitars. Billy Corgan at one point said guitars are dead. You know, tell him now that he's out on his reunion tour. Do you know what I mean? So are they still dead? Is it a zombie?
Did you ever see that interview, one of the last interviews with Cobain, where he's talking about how they want to make new wave music and have break dancers? And have you seen that?
I saw an interview where he said, as far as I'm concerned, where on our, like, the Beatles went from Love Me Do to Sgt. Pepper to White Road to Abbey Road or whatever, as far as I see it, we're still in our first 4 albums of the Beatles. So like, that's like with the Beatles help, you know, like, do you know what I mean? He felt like they were still in there. They hadn't even got to Rubber Soul. Do you know what I mean? So I think there was a lot.
Yeah. It would have been interesting to see how they would have kept guitars or not, you know?
I can't imagine them not, because he used to say about Pretty Hate Machine that it was a really good album, if not for all those lame keyboards.
Oh, really?
So you know, which I think Trent Reznor took a bit to heart, because he got like proper guitar, you know, saturated after that. Do you know what I mean? Don't you dare call me a pussy, you know.
Lee, what is your audience for this new show, and where is the platform people can find it?
It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be all it's just going to be, we'll probably put it on Facebook, anywhere that will host a long show, we'll put it, and then obviously we'll be putting out ads and snippets and things like that over the shorter social medias, your Twitter and Instagram and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, it's, hopefully there's a wide and broad enough amount of people from all over different places that are kind of like going to be involved, so it'll reach a nice broad amount of people, and there'll be a bit of cross-pollination. Everybody will hopefully go, oh, follow that guy, and some people will learn how to make stickers. We've got a guy who does art showing you how to make stickers, which is great at home. Which I told my brother who's DJ Theoretical, you know him from Half Decent, and he said, how do you make stickers? I said, well, you'll have to tune in to find out. So yeah. And we've got Desert Storm, you know, the heavy band from Oxford, Desert Storm. They're showing you how to do nice meals at home and stuff like that. Different interesting meals. They got a monkfish, what is it? Red hot chili, funky monkfish something.
Right.
So yeah, right, and we've got like someone showing you, Andy, who used to be in a band called Verbal Kink. He's a fitness trainer, so he's showing you some fitness stuff you can do easily enough. And so it's supposed to be, we've got just this is an exclusive, just receiving bings from Grace Jones's drummer, is going to give you a drummer lesson as well. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so there's some great stuff. MC Tunes is going to do his classic tunes with MC Tunes. So we've got quite a few people just contributing little bits from all over, largely about their passions, which is quite nice as well. So it should be quite a broad show. We're trying to aim for something between Richard and Judy and The Word. like somewhere right between those two. Like
Cool.
a daytime TV show, but edgy, but family friendly. Cool,
You're the
I
great,
guess.
perfect host, Lee, and I appreciate you asking me to be on it. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
so we need to quickly, let's just do a little quick chat about I just wanted to talk to you about because obviously part of the show is focused on people doing stuff and with their minimum kind of whatever they've got to hand and everything. And I think you're like a perfect example of a pioneer of obviously the laptop rap thing, but also just in general as a person who makes the most out of whatever you've got to work with. And you've throughout your career just kind of taken something small, built on that, done something with that, taken that to another level, and then taken that to another level, and just always been kept your, I guess, your brain open to new ideas and your heart open to new collaborations, but also just kept some kind of fire in you that whatever the means that you have, you somehow managed to get the best out of. So I wanted to talk to you a little about that. I don't really know how to structure it so much as asking you, how do you, like, it's what, how long have you been in this rap game now?
My first show was 20 years ago on March 11th. So 20
Wow.
years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that first rap show as well. That's not even including, because obviously you came from a DIY punk scene before that, so I presume a lot of your ethics kind of came from that kind of process.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying everything you said, by the way, Lee. Thank you. That's
That's all
nice.
right. It's totally from the heart.
I appreciate it. I used to play in punk bands and book like local rec centers and community centers, and then I started doing the MC Lars thing, or I call it Lars Horace, as a way to open for these other bands.
Right.
And that kind of took life of its own.
Right.
That, I think the thing I realize is that no one really cares, and no one should care about your art. So if they come to see you, it's a blessing, and you should make everyone feel at home and comfortable, and they're your friends. There's a barrier between the stage and the audience that needs to go away. And so I think that taught me to be humble. If you have 5 people to come see you, good work. That's a huge achievement.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you actually did it. That's something you did. Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually came, and even if they're your friends or they're just giving you a favor, maybe more people will find out. I think the Oxford scene was interesting because in 2003, when I was studying there, the scene was so like appreciative of the energy I brought, but also like everyone was so nice, and I felt so included, and I'll never forget like that, and especially the Truck Records guys. Like that was a moment that couldn't be repeated, and it's definitely, the world has changed, but when rap was still new. I also think being a rapper like me was different. Like 20 years ago, it was kind of uncommon, the
Sure.
nerdy
Absolutely.
rapper.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So all those things, I think, I'm just grateful, and I still can't believe I get to do it.
But I mean, like literally, you have made like a whole life out of turning up with your laptop and rocking a gig. And
Right.
that's, do you know what I mean? And doing it as good as any gig that anyone can go to in terms of, entertainment value and, and the quality of the music and the quality of your show and everything. Like everybody who's been to a Lars show knows that it's 100%. Do you know what I mean? So
Thank you.
I think, no, but it sounds like I'm kind of, kissing your butt or whatever, but it's absolutely true. And I think that plays a massive part when you say about Oxford. I think Oxford, if it does do one thing pretty well, it notices when something's going on. When there's something going on with an artist, it's pretty good. I mean, Smilex, I also wanted to destroy that barrier. I just wanted to literally destroy the barrier. Like, so I was like, it was with destruction that I did it, if you know what I mean. And I'd go out into the audience and make them feel something. Maybe that was fear, maybe that was apprehension, maybe that was disgust or revolt. Do you know what I mean? But it was like you kind of almost reached out and gave them a nice massage, whereas I was kind of like literally spitting in their faces. But it was in a similar way to break down that barrier between the stage. That's why I'd get off of it. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I have a lot of stories of you being in the crowd, climbing on the crowd, like relentless.
My knees have many memories of it now. Like, and my back,
awesome.
my back and my knees both remember it very clearly. Yeah. So, But yeah, but I think you know, and Oxford was pretty quick to kind of go, oh, there's something going on here with us as well. So I think that you brought that kind of a show does also mean that, you know, you could say it about youth movie soundtrack strategies as well, who came from High Wycombe, and suddenly everybody went, oh, this is a bit good, isn't it? And Lapsus Linguae came down from Glasgow, and everybody's like, this is amazing. We you know, come back down again as soon as you can, kind of thing. And you know, so we're quite Oxford is quite good at seeing that kind of. They know when someone's giving them a good show, luckily. So, or at least for that period, certainly that was a lot of the strength of it. Plus, it's such a connected scene. It's got a great infrastructure between press, radio, all these kind of things. It's like its own country unto itself in that sense. Do you know what I mean? I feel like LA must be pretty similar or something. Like if you're in LA, you know everything in LA because you listen to LA radio and you know you see these LA people around and everything. I feel like that must be like what Oxford's like, just a bit posher.
And more concentrated. I think that I've never been in a place that felt like such a scene, you know, and these friendships that are maintained from that.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. Yeah,
Seattle. Well, I wonder if Seattle was like that actually when I think about it, you know, and also rainy as well, you know. So
yeah, that's true. When I go back to Oxford, though, it's different. I can't really sell tickets there. Like the last show we were going to play a few years ago, 5 people bought tickets, so the promoter canceled it. Whereas we're selling 200 tickets in London and like
yeah.
You know, it's weird, man. It's like that people have graduated and left, and it's maybe it's too close to London or I don't know, but it's weird. That was weird. I was like, oh, so this was like everyone's grown up and left.
I mean, being honest, the Oxford music scene has really diminished. Well, I mean, I'm not there, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But my reading of it from a distance is obviously we've lost the Cellar, which was huge.
Right. Oh, really?
Yeah. So that really, yeah. I mean, you know, I one of my very first shows was at the Corn Dolly before it was the Cellar. So you know, like way back in my funk band when I was a teenager. So
just not enough people were paying to go.
There was some kind of rule breaking that had been going on health and safety wise for a while, and they needed a lot of money to sort it out. And then when they finally did get the money, I don't know, something died along the way. I can't honestly say because I wasn't close enough to the whole situation. I did a lot of as much helping with the fundraising and getting news out there, and I was in touch with Tim a bit, but you know, it's not my I wouldn't like to judge anything of someone who like ran a venue for that long. I've done a bit of promoting in my time, and it's a long haul, and I'm really glad I don't do it anymore. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sure you probably feel the same about like, you know, like your punk days or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's a long slog and a hard haul. And there's always problems, and it's always changing, and you're always fighting the council in Oxford, you know, all the noise stuff always. Do you know what I mean? It's always that noise. That noise becomes your culture. Do you know what I mean? So when it hits the mainstream, that becomes that same thing that you're paying hand over fist to go and see in an Enormodome in your herds. Do you know what I mean? So I think, you know, I remember back when Radiohead did their South Park gig. There was a huge uproar from all the people around. Are you kidding me? It should be celebrated. There should be a procession through the street. Do you know what I mean? Radiohead went out and conquered America.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
World conquered the world, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really happens when you conquer America, isn't it? Right. But that's the hard bit for British bands. I mean, the Prodigy almost managed it, but I don't know if America's fully ever got electronica. Do you know what I mean? So or certainly dance music, you know.
Well, until 2011, when dubstep became the defining pop.
Yeah, it's strange though, because American dubstep's not like English dubstep anyway, is it?
True.
It's like
very true.
English dance music always has this, and I'm not saying this in any offensive way to American, because obviously I'm a huge fan of so many American forms of music that it's not even worth talking about. But I do feel like on the dance scene, I feel like England has a little bit of an edge that somehow most Americans just don't somehow get, like Goldie and, you know, like, you know, that kind of underground, you know, you could, like how tricky is what Muggs is to, do you know what I mean? You don't really have a Goldie by comparison. Do you know what I mean? And that kind of, does that make sense? Like you meet an electronic producer who's also a rapper? No, who's got that? No, an electronic beat maker who makes the underground sound of the streets and somehow manages to convert that into something that becomes the cultural touchstone. Do you know what I mean?
Music.
What, sorry?
You mean for electronic music specifically?
Yes, particularly through what I guess Americans now call EDM or whatever. I just don't think I don't know if it's got the dirt and the grit, which is hilarious because obviously in hip hop, England's forever kind of trying to capture the grit of, say, your Wu-Tang or Muggs or do you know what I mean? But in dance music, I always feel like beyond the very first, Detroit house kind of stuff from your Larry Levans and things like that, I feel like beyond those influences, I feel like the ball kind of almost got passed over entirely to the UK, and it's always been like a bit edgier. Even like your mainstream acts will grab British producers. Say Madonna, for example, grabbed William Orbit, and then is Jacques Leconte as well, and from Le Rhythm Digital and stuff like that. So I don't know if he is English though, so I might be speaking out of turn, but William Orbit for sure. Do you know what I mean? I think there's something in dance music there's just an edge that's in the English stuff because it's really grassroots.
I would say, yeah, you're right, Lee. And I would say something I've noticed, especially from when I was living there, was how hip hop and EDM were so connected, like with like the early Streets and Dizzy Rascal, and like, hip hop is more of a subgenre, like garage or whatever, is a subgenre of electronic music, more than in America, because it kind of differentiated itself when Dre left the World Class Wrecking Crew, and like disco was the birthplace for Sugar Hill Gang, but
we had to move away from the dance, to get slower and grimier, essentially,
and more James Brown and less Kraftwerk, right?
Yeah, more P-Funk, more George Clinton, less the Afrika Bambaataa way of doing things or whatever. Yeah.
And I feel like that was Stetsasonic and Planet Rock were some of the biggest rap hits in the UK, alongside like Fat Boys and Run DMC, but like, and that kind of resonated because you're right, the grassroots, all night parties, warehouse thing, and I think that
turned into a lot of, in England, that turned into people like S Express, Bomb the Bass, and I guess even early Prodigy, like taking guys with samplers, but they were making dance music for field parties and for underground club parties and stuff like that. So it's also what they're making it for. Is kind of like the early origins of hip hop are all in the dancing and the kind of block parties, and then suddenly it becomes about something to put on in your car whilst you roll down the street really slowly. Do you know what I mean? And like the LA vibe, for example, is like, it's a totally different thing to the New York vibe. It's all about that it's about that expansiveness, the way they have long streets and like long roads and and like big long cars, and do you know what I mean? It's all
cars. New York people don't really drive, so and that's
the Wu-Tang, isn't it?
All
that clatter. Do you know what I mean? And DMX, all that raucousness and the grime and the noise, the streets, the sounds, the turn. Do you know what I mean?
The closest thing, talking about electronic producers to like enter the mainstream in the past 20 years, if ever, the biggest thing here was Moby, who's kind of like not as popular, but
he's whilst he has his origins in that club kind of thing, by the time he broke big there, it's kind of him doing coffee table music, really, isn't it? It's him melding soft electronica, trip hop and such, with old samples from like blues and old gospel things and stuff like that. So it's a real kind of, it's a conversation piece for the coffee table, for adults to kind of appreciate, if you know what I mean, rather than, it's not for the people who are kind of like, when he was doing Go back in the old days, it was so that, kids would go like that in a club. You know what I mean? So it's what you're making the music for that changes the whole way it's presented, I guess, as well, you know. So.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about, the dichotomy of audience with like Batman, right? It's like, who do you make it for, and what does the mainstream want? And becomes a forever loop. And I always think England has been kind of ahead of the curve with culture and music, and that's why I feel so blessed to be able
sometimes.
In what way
sometimes
England behind the curve, do you think? Do you think they
right now? I
Yeah.
feel like right now, I feel like we're in perhaps an even bigger doldrums than America, because there's not as much land mass. So over your land mass, you have so many more people listening to such a broader range of stuff, and each of those things can get a larger fan base. Whereas everything in here has been provincialized to like a load of people listening to commercial mainstream music, and then a load of bands playing in pubs to nobody. Do you know what I mean? And so
Totally.
I think that polarization is heavier because or deeper and more impactful, because there's not as many people just in general to buy to essentially to buy your stuff, really, because really it comes down to someone buying something at some point.
Or streaming it enough to make you money.
Yeah, but that's too many times. If I make a song, I have to stream it 250 times to make 1 penny.
Right. That's
That's a lot.
great.
That's a lot. Getting
But I would argue though, Lee, also that like in America, because there's so much space that it's the same thing. You have super mainstream stuff even at the theater level, and then you have tiny bands who play to their 10 friends. And I think England has a stronger culture of going out to the pub, going to shows than the US. I guess the grass
they
is always
definitely have a going out to the pub down.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether in recent times people's expectations of music has allowed for they'll be fine with just some dude playing some acoustic covers in the corner. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I don't think there's a what I feel about this century as opposed to the last century is, in the last century is all about what can you show me that's new? What can you show me that's innovative, that takes me somewhere, show me something I don't already know? And this century has been all about give me something like that I feel comfortable with. Give me something that I feel secure with. And that's the polar opposite mentality. So the more you're trying to do something new or different, etc., the less people are receptive to it, because they want safety in their investment, whether their investment's time, energy, money, whatever it is. They want more security that it's a sure bet. They have less time, they have less money, they want to make sure it's definitely it's going to be good for them. That's why they'll read 15 billion reviews of a movie before going to see it, because they want to know it's worth it. They don't even care if they know half the movie, as long as they were sure it was a good experience.
Would you say that's British people, or that's just people?
No, that's the world, or the Western world as it's developed now, I think.
Well, and also going back to we were talking about comic book movies, as choices have become expanded, you want something familiar. You want the brand, the story you're connected to. You want the cover bands.
The interesting thing is we've become so individually catered to now, because everybody's this little avatar who says, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I like this and this and this, and computers go, really? I'll send you more of that. And basically, so we end up in this little kind of
bias, right? Like on Facebook, if you have a certain
oh, absolutely, yeah. So we've become quite blinkered, and so we're exposed to a lot less stuff randomly than we used to be. And I used to find the weirdest of films randomly, and I used to find the weirdest of bands through random ways. You know, now you're kind of catered to for more of what you need, more of what you've already say you like. But then we all know that what you're into when you're 13 isn't what you're into when you're 17, and likewise, what you're into when you're 17 isn't necessarily what you're into when you're 21. Some of these things might stay the same, but you're constantly evolving. The problem is people are now setting themselves in a slipstream for development. So we're not kind of broadening out and going, oh, actually, you know what? There's that over there and there's that over there. Like in the 90s, if you were into Nirvana, somehow you magically ended up hearing some Björk, or you ended up hearing some Public Enemy. Sure. And it's like, how did that happen? Those things aren't automatically what you'd put together, but it happened because shows were a bit broader and diverse. And the more the idea was, is this alternative, not is this sound.
I would say those examples are the monoculture of MTV. I mean, in America, that's why all people would like those bands, because MTV played them. That's really the main reason.
The magazines would cover a broader range of music. It isn't also catered. It's not, here's a playlist. Nowadays, for example, when I was young in bands, you would go to a gig and there'd be 4 different bands on a bill, and they'd all be pretty different, and the gig would be it'd be packed. The gig would be, not every band would have everybody watching them, but the gig would do well. Everybody would get paid. Everybody saw some stuff that they liked, and everybody had some stuff to complain about if they didn't. Do you know what I mean? And everybody was happy. Then it broke off into subgenres, and you had 20 people at the doom gig, 20 people at the punk gig, 20 people at the classic rock gig. Do you know what I mean? And all you've got is a failing scene.
And I think that unification is what allowed me to get my start in. But I think on a positive note, I think a lot of what young people are doing with YouTube and Spotify, even though it's not mainstream selling arenas, there are artists who are making a living who are doing really cool stuff. And I think that's positive.
I have great hope. I have great hope, and I'll take it one further. For the last at least about a year, maybe coming up to, I've been predicting that the next cultural revolution will happen in around about 2022, because if you look at the Beatles in '62, and that started a wave of counterculture that dominated stuff for the next 7-ish years, I would say. And then in '92, 30 years later, after the 80s, which was obviously the 60s happened after the 50s, after the 80s, which was a very similar thing to the 50s, we had the 90s, which 92, you had Nirvana knocking Michael Jackson off #1 and therefore setting a whole new cultural precedent. And that culture lasted, again, about 7 years or so until we got into a retroactive making all the charts of all what was the best of the century. We started looking back a lot, and people started realizing there was a lot of love for all that stuff, so they could make a lot of money out of reproducing all that stuff all over again. And that's what our culture has been. If you look at like the big blockbuster movie now, it's in a very similar state to what it was when we'd had about enough of Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, Dolph Lundgren, absolutely all of them repeating the same movie over, and like Predator, love it, but Eraser, not so much. Do you know what I mean? So we're getting into, and then suddenly you had Tarantino. Action heroes were like character actors, skinny, geeky looking dudes with ultra violence, and do you know what I mean? And witty banter. Do you know what I mean? And so I think cultural change, Tim Burton taking it in this weird gothic-y, arty, dark S&M direction. Do you know what I mean? So you know, you've got like and then musically, obviously, you've got all the grunge thing happening. You've got gangster rap, and you know, which is totally street reportage and everything. Do you know what I mean? And then you've got even in England, you've got all the indie bands coming up out of the toilet scene. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly they're the pop stars. You know, your Blur, Elastica, Pulp, you know, and then Oasis, I guess.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So culturally, I think we're gearing round to it all over again, and the kids are going to be jaded, and they're going to want something that they can. People are going to want to hear mistakes quite soon. You know, there's just no. You can't hear a crack in someone's voice anymore.
Right.
People want to know that they did it.
I was going to say, as a way to sum all this up, if only there were a global pandemic that could keep us inside, that would somehow spur this revolution 2 years before it happens. That'd be awesome.
It would be good, wouldn't it? Culturally, I mean, the thing is, if we can just stop fighting each other for toilet rolls, then we might have a future. Do you know what I mean?
I always appreciate you and your honesty and your heart and your passion for music, and I want to thank you for inviting me on, man. I always love getting to talk.
So, yeah, cool. Is there anything you're getting on with that you want everybody to know about?
I am on Patreon, and I'm doing every month 2 songs. I do 2 songs, and I'm doing all the Marvel movies in the order that they take place chronologically. So I just did my 2 Guardians.
How did I not hear about this? I'm literally going to go and listen to this immediately after I hang up this.
That's
awesome.
Nice.
What are you on so far?
I'm on Guardians Galaxy Volume 2. I'm releasing today.
A lot. You've gone quite a lot. That's quite far in.
It's pretty far, and I'll be done like in September. And then I do a weekly podcast, and I do a YouTube show where I review each and talk about the history of each of Insane Clown Posse's like.
Oh yeah. No, I've been watching that very keenly. I like a bit of Insane Clown Posse. Do you know the song Cotton Candy? That's my favorite. Yeah. I love that. I can rap half the verses to that. I love that.
We did the Gathering of the Juggalos 2 years ago, and it was
amazing.
Yeah, it was
amazing. Wicked. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Everybody go to mclars.com.
Yes, sir. It's all there.
Yeah, so I was going to say, with regards to this Marvel one though, so what if Black Widow comes out before?
Yeah.
Are you going
That's
to have to do that as well?
in May. I mean, Black Widow takes place like what?
Within,
After Captain Marvel, before Iron Man, right?
right? Yeah, so you
I'll
kind of got to
have to do
include
it
it.
then anyway,
Yeah.
because I can't. Yeah, I've already. But that's a good question. I mean, my thought was, do I do my song about it when the movie comes out, or do I wait to the end? I think I'll wait to the end and then do it as
Yeah,
an after final one. But
yeah,
yeah,
maybe. In
very good
chronological
question.
order, I guess it has to be, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a
As
guy,
opposed to canon, as opposed to fictional timeline or whatever. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're a good interview, Lee.
Oh,
I
thanks. I feel like I talk too much.
no, you're good. I asked you a lot of questions. That's why.
Good.